Good morning, everyone. And first of all, let me hope that each of us is safe and we are staying indoors in this unprecedented pandemic, which has taken almost half the world into its grip, more than half the world, almost the entire world into its grip. So, in this third in the series of webinars that ELP is conducting, we are today going to be focusing on the GST implications arising on account of various concerns, issues which are being faced in this lockdown period, especially because of COVID-19, and that too more specifically for the manufacturing sector. Uh, I'll be supported in this presentation by my partner Rohit Jain, and the entire team at ELP has done really hard work in putting this together. So as we move into the lockdown situation, the implication is that we were at the start of the month of March when we were trying to push our sales, etc., pretty high to ensure that it's a good closure for the year. Business was as normal. Then we had the lockdown coming in, the spread of the pandemic, and all of a sudden there was a disruption in the operations. The disruption in the operation brought to stall a lot of activities which were going on in the normal course. We had various obligations, performances of various contracts, various deliveries, various orders, etc., to be fulfilled. In addition to that, obviously, there were a lot of compliances, both statutory compliances as well as regulatory compliances, all of which went into a stalemate kind of. Everything was held up. And that is bound to result into some sort of implications which are likely to arise from that, or consequences which are likely to arise from such stalemate. These could be in the nature of damages or fines, penalties, etc. And therefore, in today's presentation, what we intend to discuss is that what is likely to be the implication and how do you deal with these situations, and more effectively from a GST perspective, what is the need of the hour and how do you make it more efficient. Having said that, what is the new normal? The new normal with the new lockdown, with the situation that we are in, there is a change in customer preferences. Customers have moved into a new preference mode, more on account of the need of their requirements, but also from the perspective of the supply chain that they are following. They may require certain things at a certain point in time, certain expeditiously, certain in a delayed manner. And therefore, there is a need that we also need to consolidate our operations in a manner that we bring in efficiency, build in or bring about a consolidation of our supply chain, consolidation of our procurement pattern, consolidation of the various activities that we are doing or we are carrying out, such that we are building sufficient and effective efficiencies. Added to that, we have seen that because of the lockdown and because of the protection against the pandemic, the government has come out with a lot of regulatory changes. Each of these regulatory changes again has an implication on the manner in which we carry out our operations, implication on the manner in which we carry out our compliances, and more importantly, implications on how do we deal with our cash flow and how effectively we manage it. What has all of these three eventually resulted into? It has resulted into a need for a business reset. And there is a need for relooking in the manner in which we do our business. We carry out our operations, we do various activities such that these are effectively being carried out, these are very efficiently being carried out, and more importantly, as we'll go through the presentation, we'll realize that there is a need arising to deal with various scenarios, and more, and with the need or with the manner in which these scenarios are being dealt with, there is an implication arising, and more effectively the implication from a GST perspective. And considering that the GST rate hovering between anywhere between 5, 12 and 18, it could be a significant implication, especially in these unprecedented testing times. So today what we intend to discuss in the presentation, we intend to discuss various scenarios that are likely to be faced in this situation and the impact thereof, impact from a GST perspective. What are some of the business strategies that you as businesses are going to be implementing? We are not here to discuss on your business strategies. We know you all are experts in that. But if there are tax implications arising from that, it could make your business approach or your business strategy that much diluted and not as effective. And therefore, how do you deal with that tax element more efficiently such that you get 100% from the strategy that you are bringing into play? There are a lot of government measures which have been announced with the lockdown being brought in. We will just touch upon some of these and of course discuss and analyze some critical aspects in relation to that. Trade aspects have become very critical in this pandemic which is covering the globe, and we've seen that international trade has been affected, and therefore from an FTP perspective also, we had a new FTP announced, the old FTP has been extended, and therefore what are the implications? Are there situations or opportunities or reasons that we should represent or bring about advocacies to the government? We'll touch upon some of that. And finally, a small journey around the world to see what other countries have done in this situation. So let's move to the scenario and impact. From a scenario perspective, what are typically the events which are likely to be impacted or affected as we look into this? The first one is your accruals and advances. As I mentioned earlier, that we were sitting in the month of March, we were trying to bill out as much as possible to have a very healthy, robust, effective year end. And therefore, the accruals took place, we were collecting advances. What did both of these mean? These meant, from a GST perspective, the event of a supply taking place. And in the event of a supply taking place, am I accruing or creating a liability to GST? And if I am, and later on those payments are getting delayed, will I be out of pocket because I still need to satisfy the GST liability? How do we deal with that is what one of the points that we'll be discussing upon. Now, having got those orders placed, the advances received, etc., there could be delay in the supply of goods, or there could be delay in my receiving goods from my supplier, and therefore there would be situations of damages, compensation. If there is a situation of damage, compensation, escalation, etc., is there a GST impact on that? Because as much as you pay out in GST, the damage is going down from your pocket to that extent, the damage collection, and therefore that goes into the government treasury. The next one is, with the lockdown, there was a specific stalemate of movement of people, goods, and it has its own implications. From a people perspective, while there are various norms that the MHA has come out with, also from a direct tax perspective, there could have been impact on the residential status because of the holding up of people in a specific nation. Goods, certain goods which are ordered have got stuck on its way. Certain goods which are being exported have got held up either at the port or in your premises. And how do you deal with those? And finally, there are various other risk, opportunities, issues, etc., which have come about, which we'll be touching upon from a GST perspective. Next. Now, as we move to accruals and advances, what is typically the event from a GST supply, GST time of supply perspective? There is an accrual which could arise, or there is an invoice which is issued, or advances which is given, and therefore it triggers the time of supply. Once the time of supply is triggered, does it result into a GST liability arising? Yes, it results into a GST liability arising. This issue becomes all the more concernful, or it becomes all the more emphasized when we talk about certain related party transactions or transactions between distinct entities. And also in those cases where we have a continuous supply, say for example, your lease agreement or your rental agreements, because whether you may not issue an invoice, your landlord may not issue an invoice, because the contractual terms are such, the event of supply has taken place, the time of supply has taken place. And the time of supply having taken place, the liability to GST arises, and therefore your intending to not issue an invoice or not accrue it will not help you from a GST perspective. The liability has still arisen. Having so happened, while both parties in such a situation may agree that yes, we are agreeing to defer or waive a rental or a payment or a consideration for that event because of a certain situation, will the GST authorities agree to it? Because the GST will look into the contractual terms, and the contractual terms make it very clear that the liability has arisen because the event has happened. In such a situation, what should be the immediate implication that should arise? Now, therefore, is there a need for renegotiating? And if you're renegotiating, is there a need for redoing the contract? And if you're redoing the contract, how effectively will you word the contract to ensure that you're able to satisfy the GST authorities that there was no accrual, there was no continuous milestone which was achieved, and therefore there was no GST liability that had arisen. Another situation may arise that there is certain amount which you have already gone ahead and paid. Say for example, there was an invoice raised in March, and in April you have gone ahead and paid, or there was a supply made in February and in March you've gone ahead and paid, and thereafter during the credit period it so arises that there is need for either an adjustment to the supply or there is a need for reversal. In which scenario, what will be the implication? Whether there will be a refund arising in that case, or will you make a suo motu adjustment? So there are multiple scenarios which are coming in. While the government seems to have been sensitive about it, they don't seem to have addressed all of that. The government very effectively came out with a circular 137. However, this circular deals only with a certain specific situation, and which is in a situation where you have received an advance and the contract has been cancelled. And the government was wise enough to say that if there is such a situation where you have received an advance and the contract has been cancelled, if you have already issued an invoice, you can issue a credit note and reinstate your credit. Or where you have not issued an invoice, you can issue a refund voucher and again reinstate your credit. And that credit, if you have a further liability, you may adjust it against this further liability. Or if you do not have a further liability, and that is very much possible because of the stalemate, because of the lockdown, it could be that you have no supplies. And if you have no supplies, then there may be no liability. Then what do you do? Because the reinstated credit is again a blockage on your cash flow. Then you can seek a refund and the government will be happy to grant a refund. However, as I mentioned some time back, that section 137 has gone in to deal with only a specific situation, the situation in relation to advance and cancellation of a contract. There could be various other situations, and as we touched upon some time back, that there could be a continuous supply. In the continuous workflow, the supply has already taken place. The milestone, which is as per the contract, has already occurred, and therefore the time of supply has come about. In fact, under the service tax regime, way back in 2011, this issue has been dealt with, and the circular has been issued which says that no sooner the ability to invoice is achieved through the milestone in the agreement, it shall be deemed that the completion of the work has happened, irrespective of whether the service was actually carried out or not, or the completion was done or not. And therefore, the service or the supply in the GST regime will be deemed to have been provided. Now, at such a point, two issues come up: that can I now provide a discount? And if we talk about a discount, the discount needs to be seen from two perspectives. So section 15 deals with discount, and section 15 clearly states that those discounts which have been reflected in the invoice at the time of supply will be eligible in relation to GST, non-charging of GST, or those which have been agreed in contractual terms and which can then be linked to the supply invoices will be eligible. However, in this situation is a post facto discount, and therefore again a question mark will arise that whether you can reverse the GST in relation to that. And we have another provision section 34, which deals with issuance of credit notes. Again, there it is a situation of either short supply or a deficient service, which comes into play only where section 34 can be implemented and a credit note can be issued. In the current situation, however, it may be difficult to prove at times that there has actually been a deficiency or a short supply, and therefore the full liability arises. Now, non-payment of such consideration would in a way could result into bad debt, and if it's a bad debt is not typically covered for adjustment of GST or a refund of GST. In fact, therefore, we have very effectively brought out a question that whether section 137 would deal with this situation. The answer is not very clear. Answer seems to be no, and therefore it is very important that we structure our documents such that we are able to deal with this situation and do not end up paying GST in a situation where we have either not received or we have mutually agreed between the parties to waive or reduce the consideration. Next one, Supreet. This was an issue from a supply perspective. We move on to damages and compensation, that because of such a situation, there may also be a repercussion that consideration is reduced, but there is an alternate other charge which has been brought about because of delay, because of non-supply, because of part supply, damage supply, etc., that there could be damages and compensation which could be arising. The issue which is that if there is a damage or compensation arising, it is very important to understand whether such damage or compensation will be considered as a consideration and therefore GST applicable to that. Because while calculating the damage or the compensation, one aspect which will be considered is that whether it is satisfying the loss which the company is intending to incur because of which the damage is being recovered. So for example, for one of our clients where we are doing in relation to an EPC contract, and say for example, it was a 1,000 crore contract, because of the lockdown, there was a delay, escalation, etc. And they brought about an additional damage or compensation of another 100 crores, because that was the estimation of the loss that they were likely to incur because of the lockdown. Now, when they discussed with us, we brought about this point that would there be an implication of GST on that? Because in that case, the 100 crores will be hit by GST, which will have to be paid to the government, and therefore they will be able to recover that much lesser. Here in this case, it was 12%. So let's say, for example, 88, and whether that is compensating enough the loss that they are incurring. So it becomes a very important aspect as to whether such compensation or damage that you are collecting is a supply and liable to GST. So in this regard, Sukhmi, can you go one slide back? let's just touch upon the definition of supply. And supply has been defined to say, for the purpose of this act, all forms of supply of goods or services or both, such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal. So therefore, if you see, the definition of supply is pretty wide. However, Supreme, you can go to the next one. Based on some research that we've been able to dwell upon, it is very clear that supply requires an effective act to be carried out by someone for the benefit of the other. In the case of Bhai Mamubhai Trust, the department has, or the court has gone ahead and concluded that the payment which lacks a necessary quality of reciprocity will not constitute a supply, and therefore no GST is payable. Now, the question which comes up is that when you receive such a damage or a compensation, is it in relation to a supply? Based on various research, analysis, etc., a generic conclusion can be arrived at that if such a damage or a compensation is arising as a result of a contractual arrangement under which there is an underlying supply, typically such damage will get added to the consideration payable under the contractual arrangement, and therefore GST may become applicable. However, in other situations, we could very effectively and very well argue that there is no GST arising, since there is no supply, and therefore no liability arises. We have, what we've done on this slide at the bottom of the slide is brought out a few scenarios where it could or could not be considered as a supply. So where a compensation for delay in payment of consideration of supply is purely because of a delay, the compensation bears nexus to the supply, because the earlier supply was to be provided at a certain point in time, that has got delayed, and therefore even the compensation amount will be added to the consideration payable and will constitute as a supply. Where the compensation or charges in the event of cancellation of an order, now this is a situation where the supply itself has got cancelled, so there is no supply happening now. Because the supply is not happening now, of course subject to case and the provisions of the purchase order, or the wordings of the purchase order, the wordings of the agreement, etc., taken into consideration, there could be a possibility of arguing that the compensation amount does not constitute a supply and therefore does not become liable to GST. In other situations like contractual receipt seeking deduction from consideration owing to reasons of delivery being substandard, etc., while in one situation where it's directly linked to the supply, it will be difficult to say that it's not towards, and where the consideration has been lowered. So whether you are able to bring about a deficient supply, etc., and bring about a credit note, that will have to be seen. But otherwise, it would typically qualify as a supply, and therefore the liability would arise. Next, we touch upon the situation that, as we discussed, that there could be situations of supply getting impacted, there could be situations of damages, compensation, etc. And for all of these, what are we saying? We are saying that if we want to bring about that there should be no GST liability, or there should be a mitigation of the GST liability, there would need to arise a circumstance where the contractual arrangement clearly speaks of the intention of the parties. And if the intention of the parties is clear, it will be reflected through the contractual arrangement, which in turn brings us to the point that there is a need for restructuring or modifying the contract. So let's touch upon what should be the process or the methodology of carrying that out. First is the need to study the contractual position as it exists. Thereafter, the need would be to determine what would be the tax implications if the amendment is brought about in the contract, and because this could enhance the total burden, or it could result into a burden where it was not intended. Second could be the timing of the amendment of the contract, whether you do it at the end of the previous month or you do it in the subsequent month to delay the whole process, because if there is a liability arising, you may rather want to time it in that manner. The commercial burden of taxes, whether it is the supplier who bears, or the customer or the buyer who bears, or it will be split between the parties, or because if both the parties are agreeing to come about with a mutual consent, then obviously it will be assumed that there is an understanding of the bearing of the tax as well. Finally, to restructure the arrangement in a manner that the tax impact is minimum, and then to bring about the amendment to the contract. So it's a process that typically we have suggested for most of our clients, revisited their contracts, etc., to ensure that they are effectively in a manner such that the overall tax impact is minimized between the two parties involved. Next opinion. Another point which comes from damages, and this is from a direct tax perspective, just to touch upon that, if the receipts are in the nature of revenue receipt in the ordinary course of business. This will be termed as revenue receipt and brought to tax from an income tax perspective in that manner. However, if the receipt are from the perspective that it is a compensation for a loss of business opportunity or something and is of a capital nature, you may show it as a capital receipt, and therefore the treatment will be undergoing change from that perspective. Again, of course, it will depend from a case-to-case basis and upon the nature of receipt and the contractual arrangement, which will have a clear and more precise understanding from a direct tax perspective. Next. So this was to touch upon some of the scenarios which are likely to arise under the GST regime, from a GST perspective, under this lockdown and this pandemic scenario which is arising. In such scenario, what is the business strategy that would be adopted? As I mentioned earlier, that yes, you all are very good at doing your businesses, and we are sure that the best of strategies will be brought in. We are here to just identify and highlight what could be the tax implications so that the business strategy that you're bringing in brings in maximum efficiency in its results. What are some of the strategies that we could envisage, and we've tried to deliberate in these slides? The first one is realigning supply chain and evolving market strategy to liquidate inventory. With the lockdown, there is bound to be 2-3 significant implications. One, holding up of inventory, which needs to be pushed out at the earliest. Since times are changing, as we discussed earlier, customer preferences are changing, technology is changing, the use of technology is changing, and therefore the obsolescence of the inventory of the goods that you are dealing in, the manner in which we are dealing in, the process in which the goods are getting circulated may all get impacted. And therefore there is a need to realign our supply chain such that we achieve this efficiency and the implementation of the new strategies in a very effective manner. So there is a need to liquidate inventory. Along with the need to liquidate inventory, we have also touched upon supply chain, and we are saying supply chain because just like you are come out of a lockdown and want to expand to catch hold of the lost business, so are your customers and so are your suppliers. So please understand, we need to be sensitive enough to understand that how best do we deal with our suppliers and how best do we deal with our customers such that the new customer preferences are met with. At the same time, efficiency is brought about in relation to our procurements from our suppliers. Next issue will be in relation to cash credit harvesting. Let me not mince my words in saying that in this era of the pandemic, of the lockdown, the biggest and the most critical concern or the biggest need of the hour would be to preserve cash. And in an operating business, GST with the rate at which it is being applicable could have a significant implication. Therefore, the attempt will be, in the smallest of the small scenarios, how do we harvest credit? How do we maximize my credit? How do we maximize availment of credit? At the same time, bring about significant efficiencies in the utilization of credit. And this in turn will go to preserve your cash, make your cash flows much more efficient and reduced from the perspective of discharging your various liabilities. The third one is consolidation and expansion of manufacturing facilities. With the growth of overall operations, with the change in the supply chain, with the overall implication arising from lockdown, as you move in to restart your business and to re-gear up into full force so as to achieve the lost time, there may be need to expand your manufacturing capabilities. There may be need for your customers to be catered in a much efficient and faster manner. This in turn would require expansion of manufacturing facilities, consolidation of your current operating structure. All of these will result into certain changes which is being brought about, which will result into capital investment. This capital investment in turn again would result into certain GST liability, GST credits accruing to you. And how best do we make it as efficient as possible and as effective so that we are able to utilize that credit and make it in a more effective manner. Next will be adhering to workplace guidelines post-COVID and CSR on humanitarian grounds. So we've also touched upon a few issues which are arising because of the MHA guidelines. There are certain very specific guidelines required in relation to sanitization, etc. All this is going to result into additional cost, burden, etc. for the businesses. Whether GST credit available, not available, we'll be touching upon those. Now, as we move into the various business strategies, the first one which arises is our dealing with our business partners. And there could be and very well arise situations where we have to deal with our business partners to ensure that the understanding and the relationships are most cordial and most effective. What are the different situations which are likely to come up? The first one is there could be a need for an ex gratia payment, a lump sum payment. And if such a payment is required to be made, how do you deal with it from a GST perspective? Now, I draw your attention back to the definition of supply we just touched upon some time back, and it says that it is a supply means and includes all of those various sale, transfer, barter, etc. The question therefore is, which we touched upon later on, as per decision, it has been held that there has to be a reciprocity, or there has to be a quid pro quo. And if there is no reciprocity or quid pro quo because it's an ex gratia payment, can I say that this is a payment not against a supply and therefore not liable to GST? I could very well say that. Of course, it will be based on the circumstances and the underlying documentation, how this has been weighed. But there is a possibility of taking that as an argument. Now, if I say that it is not liable to GST, will the department stand up and say then that this is an exempted turnover? It's an exempted turnover, therefore a reversal of ITC. Here again, can I say that it is not a supply at all, and therefore there is no question of terming it as an exempted supply, and therefore there is no reversal of ITC also that is required. So that's so far as the ex gratia payments are concerned. The next is from the perspective of discounts. Again, discounts, as we've already discussed, there could be discounts before or at the time of supply, which are very clearly covered under section 15, and discounts will be duly recorded in the invoice, and therefore these will be eligible. No GST will be charged into the portion of the discount. If it is after the supply, again, if it is established by agreement terms and is linked to relevant invoices, then yes, you could issue a credit note and the ITC will be reversed by the recipient, and you could reinstate the ITC. However, where there is, it is not as per the agreement terms and not linked to relevant invoice, then a commercial invoice will need to be issued. The ITC cannot be reversed. And again, there could be an implication. So therefore, again, how do we deal with our discounts? How do we structure it becomes very important, depending on the need for, depending on what is the kind of GST credit that is available in our books, that we may take one of the appropriate strategies. The last but very effective point is price variations. In a lot of businesses that and for a lot of our clients that we've seen, that price variations come about, and because of a price variation in the underlying items, there could be a need to either grant a relaxation or to cover up some of the costs of the purchaser. So for example, there may be a situation where the prices have gone higher, and therefore to mitigate or to compensate the customer, you may go ahead and absorb the transportation cost of the goods, etc. In such situations, it's very important that you reflect the intent of the transaction very effectively in the documents, because if not, it could be tantamount to a discount, and a discount which is not as per the agreement terms, and therefore you may not be in a position to reverse the GST thereon or the ITC. And if the credit is an issue for the purchaser, there may be an implication on the overall situation. So therefore, essential to mention in contractual agreement or purchase order exactly the terms for the price variation, and those are reflected in the manner in which they are intended to be. The revised invoice will be issued at the revised price, as has been shown in the previous slide. Go ahead, Sophie. The next issue which comes up is in relation to inventory loss and ITC. Again, because of the lockdown, there could be n number of situations, multiple situations, but typically what are likely to arise is there could be significant amount of non-moving goods. There could be expiry of goods, either because of expiry of the dateline as to the viability of the goods, or there could be an expiry of the requirement of the goods by the purchaser, and therefore again there'll be an expiry of the sale of the goods. So therefore, in either scenarios, there could be a situation of the sale being cancelled, or there could be damage of the goods, etc. On all of these situations, there is a possibility that there could be inventory loss. Another situation is the situation where the goods are lost, stolen, destroyed, or written off. So as we are all aware, under 17(5), there is a loss of credit in case of all of these situations. Now, a question which comes up is that because of this unique situation, this unprecedented testing times, where the losses are arising because of a circumstance and not because of the normal course of business, should the government have gone ahead and relaxed the provisions of 17(5) to not disallow the credit in this aspect? Another issue is that does the government have the power to do that? Now, all of us are aware, and we'll be touching upon this again, that the government has passed the taxation ordinance by which they have brought in a new definition of force majeure, and that covers a epidemic as well, and therefore the COVID-19 is one of the epidemic which has been covered therein, and therefore it's a force majeure. And the government has taken upon its powers to modify laws or relax certain provisions in view of this pandemic. Would this come within the power? I would assume yes, and it's a matter of time that the government should be issuing some such provision, some such notifications to relax the situations. From the damaged goods, etc., the issue which comes up is the claim for insurance. The important point here is that when you're making an insurance claim, it is important that you also include within the claim the loss of credit which is likely to arise because of damaged, stolen, lost goods. We are aware, and we have helped a lot of our clients in claiming and availing this benefit, this claim from the insurance companies in case of loss of credit arising on account of loss of goods. So just a point of information that opt for this, as it would tantamount to be a good practice. Next. Now, these were some of the generic issues. We come to the next issue. As I mentioned, the need of the hour and the most critical issue is the issue in relation to preserving cash. And preserving cash would have a corollary to harvesting the credit. And therefore, what are some of the thought processes which would be implemented by businesses, and what are the GST implications likely to arise with that? The first important aspect is revisit credit terms with the suppliers. The relaxation brought about by the government is not just for you, it is for your supplier as well. And if it is for your supplier, it creates some amount of liquidity for your supplier also. And if it creates some liquidity for your supplier, can you be in a bargaining provision with your supplier to ask for better credit terms? You may well be so, and therefore it should not be lost upon you to go back to the supplier for revisiting the credit terms. More importantly, in these difficult times, as you receive goods from your supplier, you will receive an invoice. You will go ahead and take the credit of that GST charge thereon. After 180 days of non-payment, you are required to reverse the credit. Suppose you have gone ahead and paid to the supplier, and supplier, because of the difficult times, is not able to pay the GST. There may be a situation that you'll still have to reverse the GST, because that is one of the important criteria, that he should have paid the GST liability. And therefore, should you protect or insulate yourself or indemnify yourself in relation to just such GST not paid by the supplier? The suggestion would be yes, in these difficult times require difficult steps to be taken, and this would be one of the wiser steps to be taken. Interpretation of constructive receipt of goods. There could be situations where you have imported certain goods. The goods have come at the port, you have filed the bill of entry, the goods have left the port, but could not reach your factory because of the lockdown, or you have ordered domestically certain goods and could not reach. Now, one of the criteria for availment of credit is that the goods or services should have been received by businesses for availment of credit. Could we take a constructive interpretation that the transfer or document of title to goods being in your name in the form of a bill of entry having been filed, the invoice being issued, or a bill of lading being issued, could we say that this was a constructive receipt and I do become eligible for availment of credit? Because at this hour and this need, there is a need for credit, so that my credit swells and I'm able to use that in my outward supplies. The next issue is the re-examination of classification of raw materials as well as finished goods, as opposed to the conservative approach, which is, till date, there would be various raw material that we will be purchasing. They would be charged to a certain rate of GST. We haven't been too conscious about examining the rate of GST, or we may not have been conscious about the rate of GST charged by the supplier, since we are eligible for full credit. But if at all there is a situation where a rate could be between 12% or 18%, in the earlier scenario, we were fine with it being charged at 18% since full credit was being available. Now, where there is a relaxation or a deferment of my outward liability being paid, and I want to preserve cash, would I be better off in actually re-examining the classification to ensure that the exact rate, and if the exact rate is lesser rate of 12%, only the 12% or the 5% rate is charged on the supplies and not the higher rate of 18%? Because However small it may seem, it will still go to assist and facilitate in preserving cash in this need of testing times. The next one is to evaluate and implement the new sourcing strategy as to whether a direct procurement versus job work. Again, the implication here may seem small, but in these times, even the smallest of the implications, when looked into the quantum of businesses that each of our clients are carrying out, will have a significant impact. What are we trying to say here? What we are trying to say is that when you procure your goods directly, it will, let's assume they attract an 18% rate. Would there be a facilitation by saying that you ask the vendor to undertake actually a job work, if there is a possibility? And of course, this will have to be seen on a case-to-case basis, in which case the raw material will be supplied by you, where there will be an 18%, but the value addition which is created for converting the raw material into intermediate or goods which are to be supplied to you will be in the nature of a job work, which will be charged at 12%. For certain industries, it's even at 5%. And therefore, to that differential, you'll be able to save the differential tax rate and thereabout bring about efficiency and liquidity in the whole aspect. Revisit the policy with regard to supply of capital goods such as molds, dies to vendors, job workers to optimize ITC. Now, there is typically a structure where for the job workers, for vendors, you may fund the job worker or the vendor with cash by which he will procure capital goods and utilize those capital goods for undertaking manufacture for supply of output to us. Could in such situation be looked into a structure where you now yourself purchase the molds, dies, capital goods, etc., avail credit thereof, and make those molds, dies available to your manufacturer or to your job worker? What happens here? Earlier, when you're funding, you will be out of cash with 100 for the value of goods and 18, which is 118 to your supplier, to your job worker, supplier, etc. In this scenario, while for the procurement of capital goods, you'll pay 118, 18 will become available as credit, and therefore net you will be out of cash only for 100. Of course, when the job worker supplies goods back to you, you will be eligible to credit, but that will be over a period of time. Here, at the initial stage itself, you'll straight away be eligible for 18 credit in the first go itself. So this, again, from a timing perspective, could be effective, and cash flow could become efficient in this scenario. Relook at the delivery terms. For example, X works vis-a-vis FOR. Since if it's X works, then including the value of transportation is included in the value of the goods being supplied, and therefore the whole amount is being charged at 80%, whereas we are aware that GTA is charged at 5%, and this could be a differential of 13% on the transportation cost if not included in the value of the goods which are being made available to our customers. This again could have a significant implication from the differential tax savings which could come about. Again, this has been a methodology which has been used, but in these difficult times, it may become a very effective proposition to export on payment of IGST vis-a-vis LUT. Again, depends on the credit that you're sitting on, but more effectively, as we are aware that in case of export under IGST, the refund is processed faster. And today, when we are requiring cash to come in as expeditiously as possible, that may be a better option than to go in for an export under LUT.
Yeah, sorry, Nishant, can I add few pointers?
The here? Next set of Supreme.
No, Nishant, can I add few pointers on these slides? Hello, Nishant.
Yeah, Rohit, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So now some of the points as Nishant had made, it's very important. Now we all are really looking at preserving the cash. Let me take a few of them what here Nishant had made it. Now supply of capital goods, molds and dies. Now many of you are in that mode where you keep on supplying every new product launch, we supply molds and dies. But it all depend upon a case-to-case basis. If you are sitting with an accumulated credit, then it may be better off the job worker or vendor procuring that and availing the credit and utilizing through his other supplies as well. But if you have a cash payment in terms of your own activity as a manufacturer, then it may be better off we are buying this and supplying under the job work arrangement in terms of without any GST. So each scenario, as has been discussed here, need to be looked at it on a case-to-case basis. Similarly, for example, the last point here, the export on payment of IGST versus LUT. We all know that recently there has been amendment in relation to the, if you are supplying under LUT, the value of the goods cannot be more than 150% when they calculate the export refund. Now one needs to start examining that if my cap, whether it's domestic value and my export value is only 150%, is the cap been provided to get a refund under LUT scheme? Am I not better off going under IGST, where this 150% cap won't apply? Because very important is that we now start analyzing each and every transaction differently, so that we generate cash. We get a, while it is not a loss as such in terms of a credit, but more importantly, I need that cash in hand for the purpose of my business, my working capital requirement. Therefore, do I need to examine with that 150% cap and go into a different structure? Some of the examples like GST on transportation, we have seen invariably that it is a comfort zone that our procurement team or a commercial team has delivered the goods at my factory. Everything is included in your scope of work. Clearly, the products which are 18%, some of the parts of auto sector says something at a 28% of a tax, which is being paid, and it becomes an accumulation or a cash flow event for me. Instead of that, why can't I really ask that I will pick up the delivery and I will pay on a to pay basis of freight under reverse charge mechanism, and I will discharge the GST only at 5%. Auto and other sectors, the differential on the transportation cost is, if it is included as part of the value, it is liable to the rate which is applicable to that part. And assuming that part is at 28%, you will end up paying differential 23% of a GST, which will be sitting in your credit ledger and credit register, where you can pay under reverse charge at 5%. So a lot of these thoughts which have been a safer route or a conservative route which have been taken in the past may not be really good one, because every company, every management is looking at the preservation of cash, generation of cash to the extent possible. So very important on these aspects. And let me touch upon the first point that Nishant has rightly mentioned, that revisit the credit terms with the suppliers. One point that we need to keep it in mind now, because of this pandemic, because of the shortage of a cash availability, there would be potentially a lot of defaults it may happen. Therefore, what many of our clients are really doing are identifying the suppliers into two categories. Supplier one, which are a large category suppliers, where they know that irrespective whether we pay or not, the tax compliance will happen. But where are the supplier two category, where it, they may or may not discharge the GST liability, then we will pay GST only once you give me a proof of payment of GST. Or if he's a regular supplier, I have an ability to adjust on the future payments. Because now, given the current situation that we are going through, lot of delay, lot of deferment, lot of non-payment of GST at a supplier end likely to happen, and we need to be ultra careful even in terms of selection of a supplier and taking a cautious approach, as opposed to a earlier approach where we have been paying GST and then we are monitoring whether GST has been paid or not in terms of two-way reconciliation. That reconciliation issue, unreconciled attempts, likely to be more under the new era, and we need to be careful about. So these are all additional points I thought we should really talk about on a case-to-case basis and start how we can avail and have a better cash or credit harvesting for our business purposes. Thank you, Nishan. You can go on.
Thanks, Rohit. No, no, absolutely. So, if the emphasis could not be lesser, and I think Rohit has rightly brought about the points, which are practical points, as he clearly mentioned, and food for thought for each of our clients to implement that. Now, moving on from the cash preservation, the other issue that we spoke about initially when I was putting across the agenda is the mobility hurdle. The lockdown has resulted into our manpower being stuck at various locations, our goods being stuck at various locations. We've touched upon both these in different slides. The first one is from the perspective of manpower. From an individual's perspective, again, a lot of our clients may have certain expats, may have certain NRIs who are operating from India, partly from outside India, and because of the lockdown may be stuck in a certain jurisdiction for a certain point in time, for a certain period of time, and may have certain implications from a direct tax perspective, where their residential status may have an implication because of the period of stay that they have undertaken in the specific jurisdiction. So that's from an individual perspective. From a company's perspective, directors, key management personnel are unable to travel to the country of foreign subsidiary for board meetings, and therefore, while board meetings may be carried out on electronic modes, but it's very important that those are documented and effectively done so as to meet with the compliance requirements. Important aspect is in those situations where Indian multinationals are having subsidiaries abroad, and if those board meetings are being conducted from India, whereas earlier the situation was that somebody was traveling there to conduct the board meetings, or certain decisions are taken from India, it will be very important to make sure and ensure that we not breach the POEM guidelines and create another issue in our hands of place of effective management being moved to India vis-a-vis the in relation to the subsidiaries abroad. The next one is from the perspective of mobility of goods. We've touched upon this to a certain extent, and I don't want to take too much time, but just revisiting certain points. Goods stopped in transit at state borders. Again, could there be a possibility of considering a constructive supply, and therefore my possibility of constructive receipt, and therefore availing the ITC? In case of goods sent at port, let export also having been given, but goods not having departed, would that tantamount to be an export? Because mind you, if it is an export, it is going to have number of implications for you. Your possibility of filing for a refund, your in case you are both into exempted and exports, then the proportion by which the proportion of credit that could be available, etc. All of these implications come into play in determination of the fact. Though rightly seeing, if you see from the GST law perspective, the definition of export is to take goods from India to a place outside India. This has not moved outside India, but the let export order has been given. That's another issue which is at hand. E-way bill has expired. We are aware that the department is sensitive of that, and they have provided relaxation in this regard. So what are the issues which come up? The issues which come up is for the monthly ITC, the goods consigned in March reached in April or did not reach in April, and we already touched upon, could I take the basis of the constructive receipt and therefore consider that the credit is available? From the export turnover perspective, whether computed on let export order and therefore consider it as my export, and therefore the implications as we spoke upon, will those be arising? Credit reversal, certain goods left, did not reach, left from the supplier, did not reach, are stuck in the midway, either the goods are lost, damaged. What are the implications coming in? In case of goods lost, 17.5, again 17.5 implications will come in. In case of goods damaged, where the goods have actually finally reached, and if there is an understanding between the seller and the buyer, there could be a possibility that the damaged goods are sent back and therefore shown as a sales return, in which case again you have a facilitation of a credit note, and that is with a longer period, and you may be able to resolve the situation. But in case of good loss, again you may have a 17.5 implication. So again, case to case, situation to situation, in these unique circumstances, we will need to identify the best solution for our situation and implement that in the most effective manner. Next. With COVID, there has been a move towards CSR. And when we talk about CSR, a question comes up that what happens to the ITC in relation to the expenditure incurred on CSR? There has been a thought process earlier also existing. We are all aware of the decision in the case of SL Propack, but just revisiting the same and then looking into the practical perspective, that if the CSR is on account of a mandatory obligation to be carried out, then one may say that yes, it is for the furtherance of business, and since it is for the furtherance of business, the credit, if any, arising from there should be eligible. What we've tried to do in this diagram is to put across the different scenarios possible. So therefore, if the mode of CSR is in mere cash, a cash donation is given, obviously no GST implications arises. But if the mode of CSR is in the form of kind, then you will be eligible for ITC. And that again is dependent on the point that what is the impact of CSR is that because of a statutory obligation, and certain other situations come into play, because like we are aware, there is a very clear bar under 17.5 that anything distributed in the nature of good gifts, free samples, etc., credits will not be eligible. So depending upon the circumstances, depending upon the situation in which it is carried out, we will need to evaluate and determine whether ITC is eligible. And the approach and the attempt should be that we do it in the most in the manner that the ITC is maximized. Certain other issues which arise because of COVID are the recent guidelines by the various ministries in the government of India. We have guidelines in relation to sanitization of workspace. We have guidelines in relation to making available PPEs, personal protection equipments and disinfectants, uh, temperature monitoring, etc. All of these are going to require further efforts by the companies, further expenditures by the companies, and therefore there is bound to be an GST implication on the expenditure being carried out. Whether will you be eligible for credit for this? And why do I raise this question? While it may seem that these are all for workplace, you are saying these are for workers, you are saying these are for sanitization temperature of workers, then why? The issue arises because can someone say that all of these that you are incurring are in the nature of personal use equipments or personal expenses? And since it's personal, is it for business, and therefore whether credit is available? Here again, there have been these decisions in the case of Steel Authority and JICO having two contradictory views. But so long as it can be proved that these were arising on account of my being able to carry on my business effectively, for the furtherance and carrying on of business, the ITC should become available. There are certain situations arising also in relation to the need to make available employment facility to certain employees. Now, any expenditure incurred in that, again, whether ITC will be available. Or let me take a different situation. There have been, the deduction on account of canteen, transportation, etc. The companies have been discharging GST because they're saying it's a consideration for service provided by the company to the employees. In such a scenario, I'm just reflecting this in light of another scenario that in the lockdown period, let's assume if there are part payments made to company, could the department come back and say that while the salary of the employee was say 100, you paid him 80, the 20 is not the deduction in salary, but the 20 is payback by the employee to the company, like you are deducting in case of canteen and things on account of lockdown or whatever the reason may be. And therefore, we will expect the company to discharge the GST liability on this 20, which is being deemed to be, because his contractual terms, his employment contract says that his salary is 100, and therefore it is expected that he's received 100 in his hand. The 20 which he is not received is expected to have been paid back by the employee to the company. Again, a point to ponder and determine as to whether there could be implications from a GST perspective. Next. So next we move on to the evolving strategy, overall strategy, what should be looked into, because like we've been mentioning, like we've been emphasizing, that this is the hour where preservation of cash will become critical. And when we talk from a GST perspective, preservation of cash is directly an implication of availability of maximum credit and utilization of such credit. So therefore, all your structuring possibilities of common credits, how to bifurcate that into
Three sets of petitions related to Kashmir were filed.
Sorry, Supreme, can you mute participants, and I'll unmute myself because I think some it's become okay. So in relation to common credits, taxability of taxable supplies and non-taxable supplies, to identify the reversal ratio, the proportionate ITC that should be available, and how do you maximize your availability during this period to make it effective. Various thoughts, various planning opportunities which have always been around, but this is the hour where if you are at the cusp of thinking of implementing those, there may be a need to actually implement those, to see from the ISD or cross charge perspective, or to segregate registrations to maximize your GST, because a common credit may get affected by the reversal ratio, but if you segregate it, you may be in a better position if your taxable turnover is higher as compared to the exempted turnover. On the other case, if there are registrations where there is accumulated credit sitting idle and there is a possibility of merging the registrations, you may look towards that, so that the ideal unutilized credit becomes available in the registration where there is significant outflow. Moving on from evolving strategies, the next one is GST on certain, from a TP perspective, that certain exceptional TP adjustments which may take place. So for example, international trade and services, sharing of risk rewards, etc. And we know that in case of multinational entities, there are situations of cross charge on various expenses, etc. Now, in these situations, there may be a possibility that there may be a waiver being brought about. In case there is a waiver being brought about, but would there entail a TP adjustment? And if there is a TP adjustment, again, would there be a secondary adjustment because of the difference between the actual adjustment and the notional adjustment? I think these are again certain points which we need to ponder, which we need to identify and appropriately deal with them in the right manner so that we do not have any implications at a later point in time. So these were some of the business strategies that we thought we should discuss and deal with and refer to the implications arising therefrom for our listeners. Next, we move on to touch upon the different government measures which have come about. We have covered all significant measures that the government has brought about and also highlighted on some of the implications arising therein. More importantly, we have also gone to touch upon certain amendments which were brought about just prior to the lockdown as well. So seeing from the direct tax perspective, the ordinance has been passed where they brought about a relaxation in relation to your compliance requirements. So the timeline has been extended from for all the compliances that were between the 20th to 29th June to the 30th of June. In relation to timelines for making investments, contributions, etc., again, the timeline has been extended to the 30th of June. In relation to statutory payments, subject to a reduced interest of 0.75% per month, again, there is a facilitation which has been provided and the payments may be made at a later point in time up to 30th of June, subject to no penalties being levied or any prosecution being carried out for such delay. There has been the legislative amendment brought about for giving 100% deduction in relation to contribution to the PM Care funds. Of course, we are aware that there are controversies as to the contribution to PM Care fund vis-a-vis the CM fund, and some are eligible, some are not eligible. And therefore, those implications are likely to arise. Moving on to indirect tax. Indirect tax, again, the time limits have been expanded for various compliances and for filings of appeal, application, etc. For all of those events which are arising between the 20th of March and the 29th of June up to the 30th of June. So that relaxation has been granted. From an indirect tax perspective, what is unique is, as I had mentioned some time back also, that an ordinance has been passed to introduce a new section 168A, which now introduces the term force majeure, and as has been extracted at the bottom of the slide, it includes a case of war, pandemic, flood, drought, fire, cyclone, earthquake, and any other calamity. And therefore, this pandemic of COVID-19 is also covered therein. And what does the force majeure do? The force majeure creates a power in the hands of the government to extend the limits in respect of actions which cannot be completed or complied due to the force majeure in the interim period, which of course will be as and when notified by the government as per the notification. It also provides powers in the hand of the government to notify with retrospective effect certain relaxations. And while these have been announced, there are certain exceptions in relation to export-import formalities. No relaxations have been granted for transportation of goods as well. From a pure GST payment perspective, while they have waived the late fee and penalty, there is no change in the due date, and therefore, while they have given 15 days of free period, thereafter a 9% interest will be applicable. A 9% interest will be applicable in relation to delayed payments. So there's a reduced rate of interest, which is 9%. They waived the late fee and penalties. These reliefs were granted actually at the time when the first lockdown was announced, and as has been put in one of the green blurbs, that we may see a further announcement of reliefs because the lockdown has now been extended. And while the country comes up in full speed, and as the lockdown is withdrawn, we may see a fractured operation of the economy as well across the country. A very interesting point which is coming through, Supreme, you can go to the previous slide, is that while they have given the extended timeline and the delay, it would still tantamount to a delay in the filing of the return since the due date has not been extended. And therefore, would it get reported in your CARO, etc. reportings? There is a full possibility. And yes, the auditor is bound to qualify your reports. Next. The next question which we are trying to address here is that in what situation should you take the benefit of the relaxation and where you should not? Because the relaxation is not coming completely without any interest liability. There is a reduced interest liability, but there is a liability of reduced interest of 9%. Therefore, in a situation where you're sitting on an ITC cash balance, ITC balance, you may be better off not availing of the relaxation facility. But where you are not sitting on an ITC balance, you may be better off to utilize that. Also, it's a reduced rate of interest, whether it's on the net or the gross. It's a question mark right now, because if I have certain credit available, can I say that that credit should be reduced and only on the net the amount should be, and various other issues which are coming up from that perspective. Next.
So, sorry, Nishant, before you move on, one more point on the earlier one. In what scenarios one should really opt for? One of the point which is also coming up is that if you are an exporter of goods, till you don't file your 3B, you are not entitled to refund either IGST or an accumulated credit. So therefore, one also needs to evaluate in that context that you will have to file the 3B to get your refund on account of export. So that's another point that one needs to be really evaluating. And secondly, it is an optional scheme. You can go by any of the state. You can go for a state A to pay opt for the scheme, whereas in state B you may not opt for the scheme. So because all of you or many of you are multi-state operations, one should take a call in terms of which state I should go for this optional and not go on an optional scheme. So very critical that we evaluate on a case-to-case basis whether should we opt for this deferred payment of tax as an option or not.
Very important practical point Rohit has highlighted. Next. Certain other aspects, Circular 137 again gives you flexibility of filing the LUT a little later in the date in case of exports without payment of GST. The 10% restriction has been deferred for the cumulated period from February to August. However, there will be a two-up in the 30th of September for the entire period, and therefore would it result into interest liability arising at that point in time? Again, there is no specific clarity on that. In relation to, like Rohit also highlighted, relaxation of export refund, whether this parameter will again apply in that aspect also, again, there is a question mark from that perspective. We have other notifications, notification 34, 35, which have also extended the due date for other operational returns, your composition returns, ISD, etc. The GST audit date for FY19 has been extended to the 30th of June, and FY20 is December 31st. It should be 2020. And from the RBI perspective, there are a few relaxations from the export proceeds on goods and software, where it has been extended from 9 months to 15 months. Next one. The notifications which were issued, notification 30 to 36, the 7 notifications which got issued announcing the relaxation from the COVID pandemic concerns perspective, very specifically set out that these notifications are not relaxing certain timelines, and clearly the timeline for time and value of supply, the date of tax of invoice, the tax invoice, the GSTR1, the furnishing of returns other than under 345 of 39, and the levy of late fee. Those are not. But overall, so if you see the tenor of the notification has proceeded to state that various dates have been extended except for these. And the extension is an inclusive list, which means to say that there are certain other things also of a similar nature which they intend to include. But where they have not extended the relaxation, it has been a very specific list. At times the question arises that there are a lot of other date lines under the GST law, which is neither covered in the not relaxed or the relaxed list. And should I therefore take an interpretation that the relaxed list is long enough to cover all those? For example, if my 180-day timeline for paying to my vendor is arising during this term period, can I say it gets extended up to 30th of June for whatever days it may be? There's a question mark. Or availment of credits on invoices from vendors who have not filed the return within the timeline, and therefore does my credit get reversed or does it get extended? Again, question mark. Or in case of sale on approval basis, the goods are required to be returned within the year, and therefore if that year concludes between this pandemic period or the lockdown period, can I say that my time extends? There is no specific clarity on this. It would be preferable to take a conservative approach, or rather make a representation to the government to relax each of these timelines as well. Certain other miscellaneous provisions or relaxation, the Vivad Se Vishwas scheme has been extended. The last phase has been extended up to 30th of June. The Sabka Vishwas scheme in relation to direct taxes, which was brought in, the due dates which were terminating on the 30th of June, 31st of March have been extended to the 31st of May. The due date for payment has also been extended to 30th of June. In the context of COVID, we had a tweet by the Income Tax Department that in the context of COVID situation, to grant immediate relief to taxpayers, Government of India has decided to issue all pending income tax refunds up to 5 lakhs. And in fact, we've been seeing that it has been implemented effectively. Of course, clarity continues to be required on certain issues. We will start running a little short on time, and I want to touch upon some really critical issues, and therefore I'm requesting Supreme to proceed to the next slide. There are certain state level enhancement of dates also which have been provided. The assessment dates in the states of Goa, Uttar Pradesh, Diu Daman have been extended. Certain state amnesty schemes which were pronounced by Bihar, West Bengal, Kerala, the date lines have also been extended therein. Certain other very key amendments which have been brought about, which are not directly because of COVID, but which have been brought about. So we had a change in section 43 where certain clarificatory changes have been brought about. A number of these are there on the slide. Rohit already mentioned about section 89, which is the unique amendment which has been brought about, where they say the valuation of export supplies capped at 150% of value. And one question as to where is this concept of 150% coming in? And especially in situations where the 150% may not be applicable, somebody may take a benchmark to again correlate that. Retrospective amendment to negate rebate of IGST paid on exports if the claimant availed customs benefit under qua advance authorization or EPCG license. And finally, the 96B, recovery of export refunds where consideration for goods exported is not realized in the prescribed time frame. So these are some other amendments which are brought about in the CSC GST Act and rules. We move to the trade aspects. And what are the recent amendments that have been brought about? We have the foreign trade policy, some key highlights of the foreign trade policy. The foreign trade policy, which was expiring in this year, and a new foreign trade policy, a new 5-year foreign trade policy was expected to be announced. But because of the lockdown, the pandemic, the current foreign trade policy has now been extended for 1 more year, and the renewal will now go into the next year. The validity of various licenses, certificates have been extended because of the pandemic, and the extension is anywhere between 3 to 12 months, depending on the license to license and in different scenarios. Certain exemptions which were given as a measure towards GST transaction, and there's exemption in relation to advance authorization EPCG, which earlier were not provided and later on they brought in only for a certain period, have now again been extended by 1 more year, and therefore you continue to enjoy exemption from IGST also when you procure goods or import goods under an advance authorization or EPCG. SEI scheme has been further extended, and the decision has been pending. There was a question on the SEI scheme. It may undergo a change. While it is not a subject matter of challenge at the WTO, like the other scheme, the MEIS, which is in the next block, which is in dispute at the WTO, and the MEIS scheme was to come to an end on the 31st of March, but that has also been extended by temporarily, I would say very effectively, that it's only temporarily up to the 31st of December 2020. This scheme is bound to be replaced by RODTEP. While RODTEP has been brought in for some items like textile goods, etc., it is in the process of being brought in for a lot of other items. We have actively been working for our clients in determining what is the MEIS benefit they're getting as compared to that, what is the RODTEP that they could potentially get, and therefore are they working that out effectively, representing to the government, ensuring that the government recognizes of that, and as and when their product is brought into the RODTEP, a rate which is effective enough and which is due to them is actually announced from that perspective. It is suggested that each businesses and all our participants listening on this webinar should take up an exercise on this aspect and represent to the Commerce Ministry in relation to the tax blocked in your RODTEP. RODTEP basically is intended to reimburse that amount of taxes which are not available as credit to you and which get blocked in the operation of your business. So for example, taxes in relation to fuel, the VAT which is paid on fuel is not available as credit. That becomes one element. Similarly, there are a lot of other instances where taxes are not becoming available to you as credit. It is a need for every business, and more so in these situations, that you evaluate each of these and represent to the Commerce Ministry to ensure that as and when they bring your product into the RoDTEP, they announce a rate which is completely due to you. Transport and marketing assistance for specified agricultural product scheme has again been extended by 1 year. These are some of the key highlights. There are other changes also in the foreign trade policy, but these we thought were critical to be announced here. A lot of trade facilitations have also been announced. Again, from the perspective of this pandemic, a 24/7 custom clearance, e-delivery for final bill of entry and gate passes, the relaxation of bonds, expeditious processing of GST and customs refunds. We've already seen implications of those. Requests and documents are accepted via email, and a lot of communication with customs officers is happening through email. Not to forget the point that we are also receiving notices from customs authorities and GST authorities through email, and so therefore it has actually expedited them in doing that. And I don't know if the frequency has gone high, but in my experience, some of the frequencies have increased. So of course, it's a two-way game. Late fee charged on delayed filing of bill of entry. The time limit for completion of proceeding and filing of any appeal under the customs has been extended to 30th June. The late fee has been waived. Another issue is in relation to the RTA FTA benefits. So the budget, this year's budget introduced a new chapter 5AA, which brings about a lot of onus on businesses which are enjoying the RTA FTA benefits. And it is very important that we understand the implications thereof. Till date, all that an importer who is importing under an RTA FTA scheme was required to produce was a COO. By a recent notification, by a circular, they have relaxed the provision to say that if a physical COO, country of origin certificate, is not being provided immediately at the time of import, the government would still be happy to allow clearance on the basis of an e-copy or a photocopy, provided a physical copy is later on made available. However, what is more important is that the Chapter 5AA provisions have now been made effective, and the onus which earlier was on the department to go ahead and determine that the certificate of origin issued was authentic has now shifted to the importer, and the importer is responsible for maintaining all underlying documents. And mind you, these documents are not documents generated by you. These are documents generated by the manufacturer in that other country or supplier in that other country. And he may or may not be willing to share all of these because there are certain trade secrets, his pricing information, etc. involved in that to be available, and these are expected to be available with the Indian importer. So there are issues likely to come up on that. A lot of clients have come back to us, and we are helping them to identify ways and means in how they can maintain these documents in a very effective manner, such that to the satisfaction of the custom officer, it can be proved that the certificate of origin is an authentic one and properly issued. Next one. Next is a bunch of certain issues that we have listed out, where we believe that the industry should represent and the government should listen to the industry, especially considering the constraints and the concerns that they are facing in this unprecedented era. So the first one is ITC on various expenses. As I had mentioned some slides back, that there is bound to be loss, goods lost by loss, damage, etc. And therefore, in those scenarios where there is a hit on 17.5, should the government come out with a notification to relax that situation and therefore grant the credit, availability of credit. Material procured under advance authorization, there may be situations that raw material has been procured under advance authorization. However, exports are not coming about because of the global lockdown. Should there be a relaxation where such material procured under advance authorization is temporarily allowed to be utilized for manufacture for supplies to the domestic market, subject of course to the condition that such material will be effectively replenished with duty paid material. State incentive schemes, while extensions have been granted by certain states, not all states have granted. And there are a lot of incentive schemes like electricity subsidy, etc., which have been announced by states. And a lot of our clients are enjoying those facilities. Now, these are time-bound facilities. For example, they are for over a period of 6 years, etc. But the time lost in this period should be added back in the total period, and therefore there is a need that the states look into that and announce extension of their schemes. Allowing GST payment on receipt basis, again, a very important aspect, and therefore in this hour where there is a cash crunch, this will go a long way to facilitate businesses. So some points on advocacy and representation. Finally, we touch upon some of the provisions and how certain other countries have dealt with and implemented relaxation provisions in their countries. So we have the whole list in front of you. I think the noteworthy are some, like in the third row, you have tax remission schemes by France, Indonesia, Italy, Australia. What these countries have actually announced is that the businesses can proceed to collect tax in the normal course, but retain those taxes for the loss of business, for the losses that they've incurred, for the additional expenditure that they've incurred in this pandemic period. These are really effective structures that they have come out with. There are various others like extension of deadline for administrative proceedings. Most jurisdictions have done that. India has also followed that. Proposal for payroll tax cut has been announced by US and Brazil. Uh, Not on the slide, but we've been speaking to a lot of law firms in other jurisdictions, and there are in US, etc., where the government has gone ahead to create some amount of funding to ensure that there is no retrenchment, provided the funding is used in a manner that has been proposed by the government. There is relaxation on mobility related hurdles in Singapore, which has been announced. So the issue which I highlighted, that somebody may lose his residential status or may have an impact on his residential status. In this lockdown period, the Singapore government has announced to say that this period will not have an implication where there is an impact on the residential status for people in Singapore. So this is some of the aspects on international relaxation policies that have been announced. With this, we come to the end of today's presentation. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I am joined with our entire team, a team of partners from ELP, Vivek Baj, Tejas Pathak, and Supreme Kothari, who will also join us. Of course, Rohit, you've been hearing Rohit to answer your questions. You may either unmute your line and raise your question, or you may put it in the chat box and we'll be happy to answer that.
Hi, I think there is a question from one of the participants. They're willing to understand whether there would be a GST implication on, the salary deductions that are proposed in view of COVID.
Yeah, so anybody wants to take Vivek, Supreme, Tejas?
Yes, sir. See, there are certain expenses which right now most of the companies are deducting on account of transportation or on account of canteen related or on account of food expenses related. So during this period, if the deduction still continues from the salary, then there may be a liability of GST. But if the companies effectively, if you see, they are not providing any services during this period, so we can very well take one line of argument that the services has not been provided, therefore there is no supply and there is no GST applicability with respect to these expenses. In addition to that, what Nishant sir has explained in the presentation is on account of COVID-19. There, if you see across the industry have started deducting some salary, maybe in the range of 25%, 30%, or 10%. So can there be a possibility that department say that actually in terms of the employment agreement, you are supposed to pay 100%, now you are paying only 80% or 90%. So whatever deduction is there, those deduction may fall under the definition of supply. In order to come out with the ambiguity of, as far as the applicability of GST is concerned on this sort of a transaction, what we are suggesting is we can very well amend the employment sort of an agreement, or there can be an addendum to the employment terms and condition and cover this sort of a scenario so that there should not be any applicability of GST on this sort of an expense.
Yeah, so that's a good point, Vivek, that today you can't have a salary being shown as 100 and deduction shown as 25. if you can clearly prove from the documentation that it's only net of the payment has been considered as a salary payment, and it is not like a recovery, it is a deduction, then you may be definitely able to take a view that there is no GST applicable in the hands of employer. And employee is of course getting a lower salary to that extent. Uh, and therefore, what is the communication that we are having with the employee in relation to this becomes a very critical aspect. And then examine in that, relation to that, whether there is a separate levy per se. Appears to be no, subject to how we document, how we communicate, what sort of correspondence we have with the employees. We also have one more question on the same chat box.
Yeah, so that
The
is
credit about the sanitation and whatnot. So Tejas Supreme, you want to take up that?
yeah, so I'll just take that up. So effectively,
Yeah, if you can keep on mute, please, for a minute to address the first one. Yeah.
so ITC on sanitization goods, etc. Basically, in these times, these procurements are being made clearly in course of my business needs, and effectively also Ministry of Health also has issued a mandate that I need to have these measures at my workplace, so insofar as I am running my operations during these times. So considering all of this, I think credit should be admissible. The only situation is that under 17(5) I have a restriction in terms of procurements which are used for personal consumption. Subject to that, I think credit should be admissible, and given the impact of these sort of procurements, maybe government should come up with a clarification specifying that for these items, ITC should be admissible.
Okay. So Tejas, we have a question. Shall we continue with the existing process of claiming MEIS till 31st December 2020?
Yeah, sure. So presently, the MEIS scheme has been extended till 31st December. So the claims which one has been making will continue in a similar manner. But however, coming to the road tax scheme, the government is in the preparatory mode as of now. They are planning to form a committee which will be, deciding what rates will be adopted on a product-to-product basis for road tax scheme. So as and when the road tax is implemented, it is not yet implemented. As and when it will be implemented, the one needs to shift to the new scheme. But till then, one has to continue the MEIS scheme benefits the way it is presently undergoing.
Perfect. So you are subject to road tax being implemented for that product prior to 31st December 2020. You should continue to claim the MEIS benefit. Yeah. So one question, maybe Vivek, you can take it up, that if we take a credit on something which goods have been received, and thereafter, if the goods get rejected, I think that's what the question is. ITC taken but later rejected means hopefully the goods get rejected because of something of the quality issue. What will happen to the ITC?
Couple of options you may can explore. One is when the goods gets rejected, you can issue a credit note, and that has to be issued by the supplier, so that when they issue the credit note, automatically the credit will be. Or another option is the person who is sending the goods, he can enter in his premises, treat this as a purchase, and thereafter they can send these goods under the sales invoice by charging applicable GST, so that the receiver can also take or avail the credit with respect to this.
Okay, that's right. Yes.
Rohit Chirag here.
Yeah, Chira.
From Hindal. Most of the many companies are actually giving the mask and PPEs free of cost under CSR activity. Now, if we have if the company supplies for a discounted price, say 1 rupee, can the credit be denied? Because it's still not a free issue.
Yeah, if 17(5) only bars your credit only if it is gifted. As long as you have certain price for that, then that wouldn't be considered as gifted, and you'll have to of course charge whatever you collect, be 1 rupee and whatnot as a GST, and you will be entitled to take a credit. But the real issue comes up in this day and age will you be really wanted to do CSR and structure it by charging this as a 1 rupee. But on a technical ground, clearly if it is not a gift, whatever value you charge, that should be fine. Then you will be out of the bar of a credit from 17.5.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we have one more question, maybe Supreme, in relation to the same what you had addressed on sanitization. Two questions, in fact. How do we prove a statutory obligation for CSR spend on PPE, mask and sanitizers? And what happens to cases where if I use this in a colony, which is my employee colony, can I still take that as a credit?
I think the directive has been issued by Ministry of Health under the Disaster Management Act effectively. So if I have to run my workplace, I need to follow these measures. So to that extent, if there is a spend in relation to PPE, mask and sanitizers, so apart from CSR, it can also be in relation to my business pursuant to a statutory mandate. But insofar as colonies are concerned, I am not sure whether, there would be a statutory mandate because of which or pursuant to which I am doing this, and hence clearly the bar under 75 may emerge.
So I think you are right, Supreme. But what the treatment that you are giving for other items of a colony that you are using, if you are treating this, not only the mask, right? You have been doing a lot of stuff in a colony.
Yeah.
If you have been taking a view that this is in relation to business, assuming my factory is located in an interior, and therefore I need to have a colony of employees wherein I'll have to provide all the infrastructure. And if you have been taking a position of taking that as a credit in your day-to-day of business, then this will also extension of that.
Yeah,
but if you are taking a position, if you are taking a position that it is used for the purpose of employee or personal use, then you will not be able to take a credit in that sense. So because it is merely put to use in a colony, will not debar you. It is all depend upon what sort of position that you have been taking in the past in relation to other goods which have been used at a colony.
Because various other expenses also would be carried out in the colony.
Yeah,
so how you're
the only thing is that in relation to colonies and all, there have been rulings like on both sides where they have said that these are at the best social welfare measures or activities and may not be in course of business. So the risk that you run in that other situation would be a little higher than if you're doing it for your factory and all.
Yes.
Next question.
One more.
So the next question is there that if the product is sold at a lower price because of the government regulations, price control regulations which are there on sanitizer and the other products, so at what value GST will be levied? So to this extent, the answer would really be that even irrespective of whatever is the price control, what is actually received as consideration is the value on which the GST is leviable. So irrespective of the cost which are there and irrespective of whatever is the price control. So the actual consideration received from the customer is the base value on which GST is payable. So that's the answer to this.
Yeah, so the transaction value for a transaction is what the price paid or payable, and that price paid or payable is the value determined for the purpose of payment of GST. Yeah, I think we already have, extended in terms of our time, and we once again thank you all for joining this webinar. And if you still have any questions, happy to answer that. Please reach out to us through email. We will send our response to this issue. And at the end, please take care of yourself and be safe and be at home. Thank you very much once again for joining this.
Yeah, thank you very much. And please